is calling, Alberta, I'm bound. I look at this picture from the working man's eye. Go west, black gold is the cry. The young folks are leaving Alberta, they're bound in search of that rainbow in the oil fields it's found. The husbands that gone west, their wives back in town. Like the gold rush of the Yukon, Alberta, they're bound. They've traveled by thousands from the Rock Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, their homeland. From the East Coast all over to the great Western land, to work in Alberta in the rich oil sand. The fishing is hurting, the farming is too. The coal mines have shut down, the lumbering soon. The dollar starts flashing out west, it is found. And it's pack up those bags to Alberta, they're bound. The work days are long and so long for some. From Alberta they fly back and forth to loved ones. For a few days they'll spend with their wife and family, and then back to Alberta in the oil fields they'll be. Whether drilling for oil on the rigs it may be, or running a pipeline for miles of sea. Either way, there is plenty of work there at hand. Alberta has called, they've gone work the oil sand. Yes, Alberta keeps calling, come work my oil sand.
Alright guys, I am going to welcome you to a stream that hopefully isn't too long, because the fact is that it is pretty late, but I felt that maybe we'll discuss something about populist nationalism and conservatism today. Some of you might be followers of the Just My Stupid Opinion channel, which is a Canadian channel. Maybe in the coming days we'll hear a little bit of his take on this. Of course, he's a friend of mine. Also, there is the Rebel Media, and Steve Turley will for sure do a video on this. I saw already that Anomaly happens to be following this, so if you're fans of his channel, this is actually pretty important news, and it has to do a lot with the currents going through the Western world as far as populist nationalism, conservatism, and the shift away from the politics of globalist liberalism, okay? And believe me, I know that it's not the most simple topic to summarize, but yeah, that's pretty much the broad stroke of what's going on. Let me set the table here. So Canada has been controlled since 2015 by a number of liberal or other progressive politicians, such as Rachel Notley, who is the incumbent premier of Alberta. And Alberta traditionally was part of the more conservative, Western Canadian alignment. See, I was I was doing a little research before this, yeah, and I'm by no means an expert on what's going on here. But at a certain point in the 80s, it was even thought that Alberta might become, they might have a separatist movement that would leave Canada because Trudeau was enacting, types of federalist legislation that was really, limiting the limiting the freedoms of Alberta within the Canadian Federation. So people have to understand that Canada, of course, is a federal entity, just like the U.S. and or not exactly like the U.S., but you get what I'm saying. There's kind of this identity of each province, and then there's a broader identity of Canada as a whole. So originally, when Canada became independent, so what you're watching right now is the Rebel news feed, and you can see that this is the this is the tally right now. The ruling New Democratic Party has sunk to 25 seats. Prior to the new party that's going to be in charge is the United Conservative Party. So we'll get to some of the background on those parties, but if you look at Canadian history as a whole, you see this competition between two, like, I guess you would call them poles of the electorate. That's how it was originally. You had the liberals and the liberals slash Whigs and the conservatives or the Tories, and the Liberal Party was actually at the beginning a little bit more of a nationalist tendency as opposed to an imperialist. When you're talking about imperialist, the Conservative Party, the Tories, they were for deeper ties with the crown. They wanted Canada to have more of a role within the Commonwealth, and the Liberals wanted to devolve more power to Canada as a dominion, and also apparently, make it a little more part of North America as opposed to the British Empire. And a lot of that history played itself out in the early 20th century with a number of iconic, Canadian leaders. Foremost among them is, wait for a second. I actually forgot this, so bear with me for a second. So I was writing about this a while ago. So this is a bit embarrassing. But William Lyon Mackenzie King, who was he's still the longest serving Canadian Prime Minister. He was pretty much the person who made Canada a much more independent country than had been previously. He was from the era of World War I, and he was one of the people who made Canada a country that could assert its own independence from the rest of the British Empire as opposed to being a dependency. You have to remember Canada is much more sparsely populated than the U.S., and in some respects they were treated as definitely a diminutive power within the Commonwealth. The rest of the British Empire, of course, was conquered by force of arms and colonialism. There's Australia, which was a penal colony. South Africa was conquered during the Boer Wars, and the British Empire basically asserted itself by wielding a lot of pressure through its associations within those provinces or imperial realms. In Canada, of course, there's a strong current of identity that goes through some people. For example, in Newfoundland and Labrador, a lot of those people are of I believe they're from a very specific part of Europe. You have David McDowell is saying Canada and Macron equals bun? I don't get it. I don't get the joke, man. I guess I'm too lame. I'm too normie today. Yeah, so Canada has Nova Scotia, for example, a lot of Scottish descent, and of course there's Quebec, which is its own issue. But the fact is that uh, since of course the elder Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, Canada has been dealing with the effects of globalism and really this attempt to make it a country that's more open to multiculturalism. And I personally am not necessarily, I don't believe we should destroy other cultures. I don't think we should prohibit. If people want to open like an Indian restaurant or maybe a falafel stand somewhere, certainly a taco shack or something. I don't care. But what they were doing under the elder Trudeau and some of his successors was to erode the Canadian identity and try to make it. It was more about Canada as a state than Canada as a nationality. So Trudeau was Pierre Trudeau. He actually successfully defeated a Quebec referendum, and that was a real symbolic point in Canadian history, because until then, many people had wanted to, drag Quebec out of Canada and make it its own independent country. Here you have Trudeau, who was a Quebecois himself, and he kept it within the Federation, within the Dominion, I should say. So since then, it's kind of gone a little more downhill. You can see here that we're not even talking about the main parties. You have the United Conservative Party, which it has 63 seats in the in the Alberta House of Commons, and the New Democratic Party has 24. What's the New Democratic Party? Well, in the 30s and thereafter, Canada underwent like this big current of kind of rural socialism, partially due to the Depression and, of course, World War II. And these people they decided that they're going to, I think there was called the Canadian Social Credit Party, and they became pretty powerful for a while in some of these provinces. In fact, I think in Saskatchewan, they elected the first socialist government in the Western world. So then, from that party developed the New Democratic Party. I guess what you could say is, in Canada, you have three different poles in the national federal government. Okay, you have the Conservative Party, which is kind of like our establishment Republicans here. You have the Liberal Party, which is like our corporate Democrats. And then you have the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is sort of like the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. So you can think of it as if their system functions as if the Democratic Party had already split between its corporate globalist wing and its populist wing, and the Republican Party had remained under the control of idiots like Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney. So that's the way it's been working. And under Trudeau, let's take one more step back, okay? So the previous prime minister was Stephen Harper, who was, a very establishment style prime minister. I wouldn't say that I know too much about how he performed as prime minister of Canada. I know a lot of people who live over here who happen to be fans of his. I don't know really what motivated people to support or oppose him. I believe probably one of the reasons that he ended up losing to Trudeau was that Canada had, its politics had gone stale, and simply put, Harper was, this holdover from an era of people who they just had run out of any fresh ideas, and of course academia and culture had passed him by. Had become much more hip and fresh and globalist and diverse, and who but Justin Trudeau, the son of Fidel Castro. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Anyway, so Justin Trudeau comes into comes into the picture, and he decides, well, we're going to liven up Canadian politics. He becomes one of the most outward feminists. He starts to support like a lot of these diversity initiatives, and he won in 2015. And in general, Canada as a whole had, in some of these provinces, the new liberal or progressive world order seemed to be taking hold. In Canada, so in 2015, we'll go back to 2015. So this is Rachel Notley. This is the current Prime Minister of Alberta. So in 2015, the new the New Democrats won control of the parliament. They won. They gained 50 seats. They'd been at 4 seats before that, and they won control. Whereas the ruling Progressive Conservatives had lost 61 seats. A pretty crazy swing. But that swing has reversed, and it's come back to the balance it was before. Now you have, Alberta's Conservatives are back to 63 seats. Not quite as big as the previous iteration, but they're definitely back, and they're going to be controlling the government. And this Jason Kenney is apparently more of a social conservative. He's going to be the new premier of Alberta. You can't see him here, but he was giving a speech earlier, and he sounded pretty goofy, if I may say so. But yeah, Canada's going further to the center and further to the right, and Trudeau's already done, in my opinion. If you don't believe me, you have to consider the fact that in every provincial election in the past year or so, he's pretty much been flattened. In fact, in this election, so you remember, Trudeau belongs to the Liberal Party. The populist left is the New Democratic Party. So in this election, they actually went and they were the Liberals only had 1 seat after the 2015 election. They lost that seat. So Trudeau's party doesn't even have anything now. They're completely wiped out in Alberta. Another third party also lost all of its seats. Probably less of a big. It's less of a big deal for them. But think of it this way. So he's lost control of Ontario. Ontario was ruled by his party for well over a decade under Kathleen Wynne. So Trudeau's lost Canada's most populous province, which is, of course, Ontario. He lost control of Quebec also last year. That was a pretty bad election for him, too. So the Liberal parties lost the 2 largest provinces of Canada, Quebec and Ontario. Now, the other leftist party, the New Democrats, are also losing to a newly vibrant conservative movement in Alberta. See, the United Conservative Party was a union between a populist conservative group, the Wild Rose, and the Progressive Conservative Party, which is a more traditional. It's more of a what would you call it? Like a centrist conservative group. And now they control the government. So yeah, you're seeing in Canada 3 provinces. Also New Brunswick, I believe the Liberals lost control. It wasn't as much of a slide for them, but I mean, let's go look at this was New Brunswick. Here's Nova Scotia. So you see Nova Scotia last year. So that the Liberals did lose a little power there, but not quite enough to lose control. Then you see, this is the one I'm looking for. So they also lost control of New Brunswick. or sorry, I think yeah, I think they were able to survive, but they needed to form a coalition or something. It was not really what they were. It's not what they were hoping for. But they're. I mean, what we're talking about here is really a disintegration of the liberal establishment in Canada, largely because Trudeau is a buffoon. The man is completely incompetent. He goes overseas, embarrasses himself in India over 1 week. People don't even want to be seen with him. And then here in or there in Canada, he he's been involved in like tons of scandals. The worst of which is where the SNC Lavalin scandal. What's up, Swede Speaks? By the way, subscribe to a Swede Speaks. He's I think where does he live now? I forgot where he said he doesn't live in. I think he said he was living here stateside for a while, but he had to move back. Maybe it was Estonia. But welcome back, dude. Thank you, Dave. I see you, Stormy Horseface Daniels. Thank you very much. Yeah, use protection, everybody. Stormy Horseface Daniels is here. Swede Speaks is offering Trudeau to move to Sweden. I think he might have to take up that offer. So the SNC Lavalin scandal is possibly the most embarrassing scandal in modern Canadian history, because you have the actual. So again, I've said this on previous streams and videos. People are talking here in the U.S. about obstruction of justice when they can't prove that our president is obstructing justice. They can't prove it because they don't have any evidence that he directly said to somebody, "Don't prosecute someone," or I think the closest they can get is that he asked James Comey whether he could, whether he thought that Michael Flynn was a good guy or something, and that he doesn't deserve to go to prison. So yeah, it's not a, I wouldn't say that Trump's been completely spotless through this whole thing, but they can't prove that he obstructed justice. In Canada, however, the fact is that Trudeau, through a bunch of his stooges, tried to get the Attorney General of Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to drop charges against a major Canadian contractor, SNC Lavalin, and and she wouldn't do it. So he fired her, and then when everything came to light, I think another member of his cabinet also resigned. I forgot, her last name is Philpott or something, Nicole Philpott, some shit like that. So now Trudeau, so this guy, Mr. Feminism, he's gotten 2 women in his cabinet to resign because he doesn't know how to do shit. He's basically incompetent. He's corrupt now. He's incapable of actually, conveying Canada to prosperity, which is really why people get elected. You talk to any Canadian now, and Trudeau's energy policy and his labor policy is strangling their economy. I wouldn't say that it's. I mean, again, there's other people who have better perspective on this than me. I wouldn't say it's reached crisis levels, but people are definitely a bit bent out of shape because of it, which is understandable. Sweet Speak says, I'm in Riga, Latvia right now. That's pretty cool. You learning any Russian? I know that some people still speak Russian there. I don't know how easy it is to learn Latvian because I don't know anybody who speaks it, so not much I can say about that. So Alberta is going to fall to, it's already fallen to the conservative movement, the United Conservative Party, as you can see up here. So it's a 38-seat swing in favor of them. And going forward, yeah, so let me project what's going on here. So Canada in November is going to go to the polls, and Justin Trudeau, I believe his career is going to be over. Okay? He is going to be gone. He is going to be voted out so easily, even though his opposition isn't very. It's not like he has the most inspiring opponents. You know, Andrew Scheer, whatever. You have who's another person there? You have Maxime Bernier. I've heard him on the Rubin Report. He sounds like a pretty interesting guy. I don't think he has much chance of being a significant factor in that election this year. But yeah, Trudeau's going to be done, and then you also are looking at a number of elections between now and then. For example, in Greece, there's going to be an election near the end of this month, which is like in a week and a half, and all signs point to the leftist government there. They have a populist leftist government, which has steadily lost a lot of its luster. The Syriza party, they're not doing well in the polls, so Greece is likely to shift significantly to the right. You're seeing Spain, also same idea, probably going to be shifting very much to the right. And what else is going to be left of the liberal world order? Well, you have Germany with Angela Merkel. Until November, you have Canada with Justin Trudeau. Not that that actually makes a difference. And you have Macron, who is not in a very enviable position at the moment. I think we would all agree that, Emmanuel Macron is in quite the pickle, as they would say, quite the pickle. So yeah, sorry for the people who live in those countries. Oh, let's not forget Theresa May, probably the most incompetent person in the history of being a leader of anything. Theresa May is an example of what not to do. Right. So who else is left? There's the obviously Swede Speaks is here. So the current Swedish government, who I don't even know the name of the prime minister. And I know what's the name. The foreign minister is that moron Margot Wallström. I think I don't even. She might not even be foreign minister anymore. So I think she might be out of office by now. Oh no, she's the deputy prime minister. You fail upward, I guess. Oh, she's still the Finn's party is also skeptical of man. Yeah, I've heard about that Finn's party. I guess we don't hear as much about Finland over here as we do about some of those other countries. For example, I mean, look, when you have France basically burning all the time, you have the yellow vests. You have this disaster right now with the Notre Dame Cathedral. Finland actually looks quite good. But yeah, Margot Wallström. Yeah, that's so she's an idiot. she's retarded, and I think she declared herself she was like the first feminist foreign minister, and she went to was it Iran, and she put on like a veil or something, and it just look if you have a position and you're not willing to hold it, then why should anybody care what you think? And that's what I think of people like her. So those are the people left leading the liberal world order around the world. I'm not talking about liberalism as a real. There is a philosophy called liberalism that's respectable. Believing that people have the right to choose, and not in terms of abortion, but believing that people have they have the right to choose certain things in their lives, not opposing government intrusion into your private life. That's the type of liberalism I'm talking about. That is, that's acceptable in, at the individual level. But we're not talking about that. Global liberalism really it's about concentrating power among elites, and especially if you're talking about corporate elites or various organizations. Some of these clubs that seem to always have the best hotels, right? The Club of Rome, and let's not get started with the Bilderberg and whatever. She said that the Jews were campaigning against her, according to eyewitnesses. Well, I mean, why would? I guess maybe this is one example where who can claim that the Jews made the wrong choice if they were campaigning against her? We do. Maybe we make a lot of mistakes, but I think when you oppose an idiot like Margaret Wallstrom, we did something right. I am fine with many aspects of classical liberalism, but not with the leftism that is called. Yeah, exactly. So Sweet Speaks is on the same page as me. But moving on. So what does that say about, we're talking, we talked about the populist right. We talked about global liberalism. What's going to be happening? So we're moving beyond Alberta. What's happening with what they call the alt-right and the identitarian right, some of these ethno-nationalists and people who are, they believe in racial theories, or they might even be, some of them are hate mongers. I wouldn't say all of them. And of course, I'm going to clarify, I do believe in freedom of speech, even for people who are hate mongers, because I do work on minds.com, or I should say, I promote content on it. So, you have to take the bitter with the sweet over there. What's happening with them? Well, you're seeing them generally, they have these flare-ups every once in a while. I was listening, this is interesting. Earlier I was listening to Owen Benjamin, who's really, something have really happened to him. I'm not sure what tipped the scales. Originally, Owen Benjamin was an opponent of racism and also an opponent of anti-Jewish bigotry, anti-Semitism, and he's kind of swung in the complete opposite direction, and it's unfortunate. But in any case, when so I'm listening to him earlier, and he's talking about the Notre Dame and how whether even if Muslims did it, was what he was saying. He said that really the people who probably are to blame for it are the Jews or whatever. So I'll say this about the identitarian right. What they end up doing almost always is shooting each other in the head and or stabbing each other in the back. It is insane how often that happens, and that's why I think that the best course in life is to remain completely independent. Don't be in a camp of one or the other, which is unfortunately what the people in the alt-right, people who the identitarian alt-right, are basically spending most of their days now plotting against each other and things like that. Last year was actually pretty bad as well. There was the JF versus Andy Warski feud, if you guys remember. Now this is something a little more, it's more of a niche audience that would probably care about this, the YouTubers. But JF Garapi, who's a pretty hardcore identitarian from Quebec, so he got into a spat with his YouTubing partner Andy Warski. Nowadays, so you have this flare up again of some of these people, but in many cases, because of the different penalties that they've accrued from corporate tech, establishment tech, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they've pretty much despaired of the Trump administration, and a lot of them have hopped onto the Yang Gang, or they've gone over to some of these other populist causes or whatever, and they've really embraced this clown world thing, and it's not going to. I don't think it's going to lead anywhere, because of course Andrew Yang doesn't want anything to do with them. Because why would he want? I mean, the last thing you want if you are somebody like him trying to win the Democratic nomination is to be associated with people like James Alsop. Okay, now James Alsop, I've never talked shit about him, but let me just say, there's nothing you can gain as a candidate for president from being associated with him, because he's been blacklisted. It's the truth. And in many cases, he's just an embittered person. You're not going to attract new voters that way. And the number of voters who will vote for somebody for completely opposite reasons within the Democratic Party it just dwarfs that. You know, if you're a Democrat and or sorry, if you live in a state like Michigan, a key state, do you think that there's a lot of people who are in Michigan who remember, the most important cities in Michigan are Ann Arbor and Detroit. Okay, two extremely left-wing cities. Detroit because it's an urban area, and Ann Arbor because it's a college campus. And then you look at some of these other cities like Lansing and Flint or whatever. It's the same thing. There's no winning in Michigan for a Democrat unless you attract these whacked out, socially liberal, economically socialist people. So yeah, there's no chance of Andrew Yang, unless he can completely shake off those people, of winning significant support in these primaries. They don't want the white identitarians have no clue what to do about actually organizing in politics. So, you know, unfortunately, a lot of them end up, you know, going nuts and doing something very violent, which, you know, I'm not going to talk about on YouTube. But in terms of organizing movements, I think like the most ironic occurrence that keeps happening is that, for example, Jared Taylor, who was the most intelligent person on the alt-right identitarian side, really kind of, you know, an intellectual, a higher mind, somebody who could talk to people, be civil, not get into all sorts of childish, you know, feuds of name calling. What happened to him? Well, somebody who was a real fire breather came along, somebody like Paul Nealon, and he started calling him a Jew. So obviously that when you get people like that, when you get some people that are too angry to actually build a strategy, your movement collapses, and that's what keeps happening over there. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those people ended up being informants for you know, various government agencies that are just, you know, there's the Halsey News, if you guys are familiar. I haven't talked to him in a while, but sometimes I check in on his stream. Halsey News has alleged several times that his co-host, I think he's still on that show, Deplorable TV. His name is Dustin Gold. They've alleged that Hal Turner, who's a rabid white supremacist, they've alleged he's an FBI informant. So that type of thing happens all the time within extreme identitarian movements. And that's why if you value your own career, you probably would do best to stay away from them. If you believe in those things, it's kind of a catch-22. You know, that's about it. So let me see here. I'm wondering how many of you guys are still watching. Not that many. Well, thanks for staying up. And I'm sure that Steve Turley is going to have a video about this tomorrow. And I think his channel is pretty good. You know, he does this in a much more short, condensed form, which is consumable during the day. You know, I like to listen to it sometimes at lunch. And he is definitely going to talk about Alberta. And you should probably start looking at some of these elections around the world. And I think this bodes extremely poorly for the Democrats in 2020. They think, well, we're going to be running this election in order to return America to normalcy, but it just doesn't look that way for the rest of the world. The rest of the world is essentially throwing off the yoke of the establishment media and returning more to kind of a traditionalist view of the world in some cases. I'm not saying that in every case is going to be good. Some of these, especially in Greece, it could take an ugly turn. But that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Of course, Sweet Speaks. Please subscribe to him as well. Who else do we have here? I think Dave McDowell also has a channel, so if he's still around, I think he's worth a look. Stormy Horseface Daniels, also thank you for stopping by. And have a great night. And we'll talk to you sometime on, tomorrow's Wednesday. Might have something tomorrow. Don't know yet.